You want me to hit a high C?
No. Welcome back to the Canine Campus Podcast. It's episode number 17, How to Live in a Multi-Dog Household and Survive It. Welcome back, Deven. How are you doing?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm good, thanks. I understand we have a letter.
We have a letter from Amanda, who's actually studying for the CPDT exam. Yay!
Certified Professional Dog Trainer.
Exactly.
Program,
one of the few national titles that you can have,
right?
Or I should say certifications that you can have. I am a CPDT myself, so good luck on the exam, Amanda. But she wrote in because she's going to be living in a multi-dog household,
right?
And I definitely think there's a difference between 2 dogs and 3 dogs. It was actually Jonathan Katz, the New York Times.
Yes.
He says that 3 dogs constitute a pack. 2 dogs are a nice family. 3 dogs are a pack.
Right, exactly.
And it certainly changed our life having a 3rd dog. It was not a smooth transition for us. For starters, there is an amazing Patricia McConnell pamphlet on this. Feeling Outnumbered, Living in a Multi-Dog Household. It's like 30 pages.
Right.
It is the best 30 pages you could ever read if you have multiple dogs, whether you have 1, 2, or 3. But if you have more than 1 dog, phenomenal book. And anything that I'm telling you today is most likely a version of something I found in that book or discovered on my own that Patricia was smart enough to put in the book.
Right.
So that's an amazing resource for anyone. It's one of the things to make note of when you've got a multi-dog household. And this was a concept that Patricia McConnell introduced me to that was sort of revolutionary for me. You don't have to be fair.
Yeah.
And think about that. That when you're a loving, human sharing their lives with dogs, part of our concept of being loving is fairness.
Sure. It's what we're raised to do.
Right. Thank you, Mark Bekoff. He's an amazing scientist that studies play and fairness and all the stuff. He's worked with Jane Goodall. He's also worked with dogs. But, and actually wolf studies. He was the first person that defined the play bow. But fairness, I think you really need to. Fairness does not mean equality for everyone, because when you're living in a multi-dog household, chances are those dogs did not all enter at the same time and are not all at the same stage in their life. So, for example, our husky's 8 years old. She has been in the household the longest.
Right.
She is incredibly reliable with the vast majority of her behaviors. She has earned the privilege. She has earned privileges that Surprise, our youngest dog, has not.
Right.
Especially in puppyhood. So this starts, let's say you've got an older dog and you bring in a puppy. Already, just spatially, the space that the dogs have are not equal. Right? Your older dog's probably house trained and earns the privilege of greater access to the house, if not the whole house.
Right.
Puppies not so, right? Might be one room, might be an X-pen, might be a crate.
Sure.
So there's a perfect example of it's not fair in the sense that they don't have equal access to the house, but it's appropriately fair in the context of their age and their development.
Right.
So, likewise...
Not fair, but appropriate. That's well put.
Appropriate. And I think that's what makes it... I think it's fair in that sense, too. So, another way that I look at this... we talked about no free lunch in the last podcast.
Right.
We talked about 2 furs, 3 furs, and 4 furs, having dogs do multiple behaviors for one reward.
Right.
I ask of a lot more behaviors for a single reward from our husky or from Silly, who's 6, than I do from Surprise.
Who's a puppy.
Now he's an adolescent.
Right.
So, recently, because he's just about 2 years old, so I've upped the ante greatly with Surprise.
Right. But it's still different.
It's still different. Although, as he develops and now he catches on and as he has more repetitions under his belt, he earns more privileges. Now, ironically, no one has greater access and freedom outside than Surprise.
Right.
So the youngest dog has earned the privilege of the greatest freedom outdoors because his recall is so strong.
Right.
So, and while Silly, our hound's recall has improved greatly, and that has given him, he's now earning more privileges outside.
Right.
It's unlikely the husky ever really will.
Right. And when we say outside, we don't mean that the husky doesn't get to go outside. It's
no, she's got a huge fenced-in yard.
Huge yard.
That she's somewhat bullyish about.
Right.
But we live in wooded area, and we're well off the road.
Right.
And Surprise does get the privilege of being in the woods out of the fenced-in yard, and Silly does too, to a certain extent. No one more than Surprise right now. Now, as Silly's recall improves, and that's been something we've been really working on, his privilege will change accordingly. So I think that it's really important to kind of do away with, I used to think if I was working with one dog and another dog came up and sat, that they were therefore entitled to a reward.
Right.
Not so. Just because I'm working with one dog and they're getting, now that doesn't mean I don't turn and say, oh, good dog.
Right.
But I'm working with this dog right now.
Right.
And, if you keep acting polite and making good decisions over there, I'll make it worth your while, but I'm not obligated to.
Right.
So I think that really matters. And along these lines, one of the most interesting concepts that I got from Patricia McConnell that has really played out not only in my home life, but in classes, group classes, friendly competition.
Yeah.
In politeness.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if your dogs have to sit to go outside, the dog that sits the first at the door gets to go outside first.
Right.
If your dogs have to sit or go to their place for dinner, the dog that goes to their place first gets their dinner first.
Right.
So, I think there's been a lot of, sadly, misapplication of poorly understood notions of pack hierarchy and dynamics within a pack, and there's been sort of human beings have tried to, and there's some trainers, very popular trainers today, that are trying to popularize this, that we need to mimic the pack to best organize our pack. And I for starters don't think we understand pack hierarchy enough to do that. The few conclusions that have been drawn were based on captive wolf studies, all of which have been proven to be pretty much useless.
Right.
So there's this notion that if your dog walks out the door before you, they're dominating you.
Useless in terms of understanding canines.
And coming up with strategies to get better behavior.
Right, exactly.
If a dog walks out the door in front of you, it's not because they're dominating you. It's because you haven't taught them to be polite.
Right, exactly.
You haven't taught them to sit and wait at the door.
So, and a big part of this is leaving our human luggage behind.
Leave it behind.
Talk about you talking about fairness versus appropriateness. Talking about what we think about hierarchy and packs, but we don't really know what we know.
I mean, if I drop a pork chop on the floor and every dog in the household goes for it, I don't think that that's a coup.
A race for hierarchy.
I mean, they're not staging a coup and trying to take over the house. That's a resource. It's hit the ground. It's up for grabs.
Right.
And may I say, we all reach for it.
Well, I think one of the things we can say about that is sometimes a pork chop is just a pork chop.
Right. Okay. And so where I find this is so great in classes, because in class, a number of my clients have multi-dog households. A number of them do not. And so a lot of the dogs that are not in multi-dog households never have to share. They never have to share. They never have to think about losing something. And so I will say to someone whose dog knows sit really well, hey, everyone have your dog sit. And let's say this dog doesn't sit. For whatever reason, they might want to be playing with other dogs. They might be distracted. I will tell their human, hold a treat right in front of their nose, and then go take it over to another dog and make a huge deal about that other dog.
It has an amazing effect.
You're the best dog I've ever seen in my life. Well, when you turn around and come back, you don't even have to ask for a sit because it's there.
Right.
It's there. So it's not just that they lost you or this resource.
Right.
They lost it to another dog.
Exactly.
And so, now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to set up an environment of competition and warfare within a house.
No, I think it's like you said, this is friendly competition.
Right. This is who's ever polite wins.
And what it creates are dogs that endeavor to perform well and creates a stronger relationship between handler and the canine.
Right. And also, all dogs are rewarded for polite behavior. So, for example, if I come home, the first dog that sits gets my attention.
Right.
The other dogs will get my attention too.
Sure, yeah.
They just don't get it first.
Right.
Likewise, I might have the first dog that does something, let's say new, we're teaching a new trick. I might have the first dog that does it get a treat. The other ones get verbal praise, love, goober, or maybe a game of tug. I mean, whatever they find rewarding. So that's another thing. Do not treat a reward equal to all dogs.
Right.
I've got a dog that loves tug. Tug's the ultimate reward. They'd rather tug than have a meatball.
We've got one dog that doesn't care about tug.
Right. Yeah. But that dog would do anything for a raw bone. Well, okay. Different reward systems, but I can work with that. So I think, it's not one size fits all. It's really important that you take the time to observe the reward system of each individual dog, because the dog determines it. And so I think one of the jobs whenever you bring a new dog into your household, and I don't care what age they are, is to spend that time bonding with them that first couple of weeks, figuring out what's important to them.
Right. And
because that's going to be at the heart of your training.
Yeah, and go back and download from episode 16 the Life Rewards worksheet. Listen to that show if you haven't, because that's all about determining what's important to your dog and what you can use and when you can use it as a training opportunity or reward.
Right. And one dog's reward is another dog's punishment. I had a client who had recently lost a black lab who worked pretty much for affection, loved to be pet, loved to be handled, loved to be rough housed. And her new lab was very hand shy. Hated to be petted. And so, here's a woman that for 12 years, her automatic response was to touch as feedback. Good job. And yet she was punishing this new dog, and she couldn't help it. I mean, it was like, no, we need to. In fact, at one point, I made her train with her hands in her pocket because the dog wouldn't sit. The dog stopped doing anything because it was like, that just means you're going to touch me, and I don't want it. So we obviously worked on hand shyness. Other stuff had to go on there, but so one dog's reward could be another dog's punishment, and each dog is an individual, and it's really important that you look at them as individuals and really take the time to get to the bottom of their reward system and use that in your training. Right.
Well, and going back to the concept of friendly competition, I've noticed you run a class called Fun and Games, which is kind of an obedience-oriented class, but it's all really, it's
gameplay.
It's gameplay. It really is.
Like tic-tac-toe with stay.
Yeah, exactly.
And spoon races.
And I find that, both for the people and the dogs, having that kind of fun, kind of upping the ante, even if we just get a laugh at the end of each game, we're more engaged as trainers.
Although, interestingly enough, I've had to modify some of the games because of inappropriate behavior on the part of competitive humans.
Sure. Yeah.
So, for example, there's musical mats, which is an in-your-place exercise. And I actually had, just like musical chairs, there's one mat short.
Right.
And I've actually had people hip check and body block people off of a mat. And so now I not only have enough mats for everyone, I have extra mats. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that dogs would actually do something.
No, I doubt they would. But it's an interesting point. I think whether you're training people or training dogs, observation is a really important part of it. Keep your eye on what's going on, see what works, remember what doesn't work, and avoid that in the future.
And I think that part of training is discovering limits, and you do that through error.
Right, exactly.
Novelty makes a huge difference in rewards, and that's something that if all you're going to use is grated cheese, after about 20 minutes, and it's not even 10 minutes in a session, your grated cheese is pretty much done. And it was interesting. We were doing a recall game the other day called Tunnel of Love. I stole all these games, by the way, from Terry Ryan, who's a phenomenal dog trainer in Washington State. And so this is kind of a hard game because there's a tunnel made out of people and dogs, and you've got to call your dog to you through the tunnel. So your dog has to recall to you, passing other dogs, many of whom they played with. So this is challenging. And I had a woman that had milk bones, and I said, those are not going to do. You need to go over and get a meatball.
Yeah.
And she said, which I consider the holy grail of dog training. And she said to me, no, I'm going to save the meatballs. And I said, what are you going to save them for?
Right.
I mean, what's more important than coming
right
to
now.
you through a tunnel of dogs that are 2 feet away?
Right.
I mean, this is your Olympic gold medal performance.
Right,
I mean,
right.
nothing, is more important than this. And she really couldn't get it.
Wow.
No, I'm going to save that for later games. It's like, if I pull out your registration form, I know number one is coming when called. Here's your moment.
Right,
so you've got to prioritize your rewards based on the priorities of the behaviors that you're looking for. And, every dog is into different things. So,
Right.
that's another thing. I find that some dogs sit when they're greeting people to jump up.
Right.
So, with our husky, we found that rather than have her sit, it's actually better if she stands. So
Right.
she gets rewarded for standing, but everyone else gets rewarded for sitting.
Right.
And actually, Surprise was so scared of people for the last 6 months that if he jumps up on someone now,
We reward it.
right, I'm like, hey, good job, because you
Exactly.
actually were brave enough to get close enough to jump up on someone. So, and I'm going to start obviously reining that in now
Right.
that he's getting braver. So, my expectations change, and that's another thing to think about too. If jumping up's an issue for you, if you've got multi-dogs, and I hear about this a lot, and this definitely happens in our own household. Surprise, who's kind of our smallest dog, he's 37 pounds. If he's by himself and greeting people, he's completely polite, he sits.
Right.
If our husky's in the equation because she's taller and people tend to reach for her first, he started out jumping up on her to get taller, to make himself taller.
Right.
And then he translated that to people. So I found that if I can get our husky out of the equation when people come in,
Right.
which is easy, I put her on her place with a raw bone. That goes fine. And then Silly's door manners are immaculate.
Right, exactly.
So that matters too. My expectations of Silly, that's not Silly at the door being difficult or willful.
Right.
That's Silly at the door competing for something he really likes and having to compete with height.
Right, exactly.
So that doesn't mean that my overall goal for training changes, but I need to be savvier about managing it.
Right.
So can I teach him to sit in the presence of Misu at the door? Absolutely. Is it more efficient for me just to send Misu to her place and give her a raw bone?
Right.
Because she won't leave her place with a raw bone for anyone
Sure.
or anything.
Sure.
So training and management go hand in hand. So
Right.
living in a multi-dog household, I think it gives you amazing opportunities.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, the things that frustrate you the most, that overwhelm you the most, those are missed training opportunities. You're just not seeing them that way.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's our entree to living
Really
in a multi-dog household.
Get Patricia McConnell's book.
And actually, there's a book, and now there's a DVD as well.
No way.
Both called Feeling Outnumbered, How to Manage and Enjoy a Multi-Dog Household.
I totally want to get the DVD. I want to see it in
we'll
action.
let you know as soon as we've had a chance to watch that. But Patricia McConnell is a fantastic writer and
Fun to watch.
fantastic
I mean, think
behaviors,
about the DVD, because her body language is. I've been in a couple of her seminars. She's really
phenomenal.
potent and delightful. May I say that? She's entertaining and
Yes,
delightful.
very much
So few dog trainers are. She really is.
And we hope it's warming up in Wisconsin where she lives.
Yes.
As we record this
With her
in
little sheep
March.
farm.
Right, exactly. So
Happy spring to everyone.
yeah, happy spring. Thanks for listening to us. I think we have about 50,000 people on the list now, which is kind of amazing.
We haven't quite cracked it.
Is it 49,000?
I thought it was 45,750.
No, it was like 52 last time I looked. Yeah, I know. Anyway, so
Yay! All these people interested in positive training.
right. So
Great.
Amanda, thank you for the letter.
Thanks,
and
Amanda. Good luck
good
with
luck
your
on your
multi-dog household and on your CPDT.
Right, exactly. And so we'll be looking to hear how that all goes.
I wonder if she's going to take that at the APDT conference. If you hear this, Amanda, email me and let me know if you're going to take it at the APDT conference. That's in Kentucky, because I'm going this year.
And that's...
I think it's October.
Oh, that's in the fall. Okay.
That's in October. And maybe we'll do some podcasts from there. That would be fun.
As we did last year. Absolutely.
Well, maybe I'll rope you into coming with me this time. We can set up our own.
Yeah. You mean all those crazy dog people.
Hey,
Yeah.
crazy dog people are fun. It's the only place you don't have to excuse yourself for being crazy.
Right, it's true. It's true. So, Amanda, thanks again. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This is the Canine Campus Podcast number 17, How to Live and survive a multi-dog household. We'll put links to Miss McConnell's book and DVD on our homepage.
Dr. McConnell.
Dr. McConnell. We'll put links to Dr. McConnell's books and DVD in our show notes and on the caninecampus.com homepage. So keep the cards and letters coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Deven.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Stace.
Bye.